It's time for Brother, Can We Talk? With the original Coach Carter, the elder Rory T. Edwards, and Charles E. Morse. Let's have great conversation, exchange ideas and information. And now, it's time for Brother, Can We Talk?
Well, good evening to all that are here with us this evening. We welcome you to welcome my brothers, my sisters, my kings and queens to this very special edition of Brother, Can We Talk? Thank you for joining us on this last Sunday of the calendar month of the celebration of Black History Month. We're excited to be back with you. We're glad you could join us for what we think is a very important conversation this evening. Let me just share with you some of the topics that we will be discussing today. Our three main topics that we want to talk about to get your thoughts and feelings about it. Number one, is the Black history still important within the Black community? Number two, are Black personal and professional relationships still relevant in the Black community? And the last question is, Black harmony, solidarity still the motivation of the Black community? In addition to that, we want to talk about the critical race theory, and we also want to share some information regarding that, and also share some information regarding Florida's SB 148 Individual Freedom Title Act that is taking place. Please, just a little bit of housekeeping before we really get started. Number one, please keep your responses short so that we can ensure that everyone has an opportunity to share their thoughts. I'd like for you to give your name and particularly the city and state that you're from, so we kind of get an idea of what we're talking about, or where we're talking to and who we're talking to. Raise your hand for a comment, or you can send something to the chat so that we know your responses will be acknowledged, so that we can acknowledge you. So all of that having been said, raise your hand. Let me know that you need to speak. I'd be more than happy to get you in, because I want to hear from you. It's not about what I think, it's about what we think, and I want to hear your thoughts. Okay, so let's get to it. Brother, can we talk? First question. Is Black history still important within the Black community? I'm waiting to hear your thoughts. So I'm going to ask if we can start with Gary Turner. Gary, your thoughts on this?
Good evening to everybody. Gary Turner, Mobile, Alabama.
All right. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, brother. And thank you for Rory for inviting me, my brother Rory, that I've known for a lot of years.
Sure.
Answer to the question is yes. I mean, Black history will always, is the question relevant? I think the word was relevant. Black history will always be relevant.
Not only relevant, is it still important?
Yes, important. I mean, relevancy and importance. Yeah, it's important and it's relevant. the question for me is always, what type of history are we currently making? What will people look back 40 years from now? And I'm sure I'll be dead and gone by then. But when people look back 40 years from now, what will they see? What will they assess? So I'm not sure if I have an answer beyond that.
Okay, all right. That's a great start. Thank you for getting us started. May I ask Richard Edwards, do you have a thought on that?
How you doing? I'm Richard Edwards from Banning, California.
Oh, nice to have you.
You know, I think it's definitely relevant. You know, it's something that we need to keep alive, because it's not like you know, they're teaching it in schools. You know, they're not. You know, the only place, you know, when I remember growing up, you know, the only place we learned our Black history was at the church. You know, and I think
Yes.
that's something that's still relevant. You know, and I think that's something that's still only going on, because you know, with YouTube and things like that, you know, you have more exposure to it. But I think it's something that it needs to go on yearly. You know, I look at YouTube and I find out things that I didn't even know, and I thought I was, you know, pretty heavy on Black history. So I think it's definitely relevant to keep people going. You know, our history will die if we don't keep it alive. So we definitely have to keep it going.
Very. I agree with you 100% on that. I'm gonna go to. I want to get a different perspective on the female side. Let me go to Regina. Would you mind sharing your thoughts?
Yes, this is Regina from Orlando, Florida. And yes, of course, it's very important. And I agree with the previous gentleman that a lot of the Black history that our kids are learning is coming from church. I'm a member of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. And of course, we were founded out of slavery. So it's very, very important to us. Our founder, Richard Allen, was, you know, education was very, very important. And so we have to keep that alive. We have to keep Black history alive. We have to keep it on the forefront, just simply because we are the people that built this country. And so there's so much more to us than, and not belittling the Martin Luther Kings and the Rosa Parks, but there's so much more to our history than that. We go back generations. So yes.
Yeah, 100% there too, because there's a lot. You know, one of the things that I think our brother Roy would say all the time. We started out as kings and queens. We aren't becoming kings and queens. We started out as kings. We come from that type of a heritage, and I'm not always sure that our approach to Black history is that way. So the relevancy of it and it keeps it alive, I think, and we continue to add to it. Catherine, may I get your opinion on this? Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
Hi. Start over. Sorry about that.
That's okay. That's
yes,
okay.
I'm Catherine. I'm in Chicago, Illinois.
Okay.
And yeah, I have several different viewpoints.
Please.
According to what you just said, to just follow up on what the last couple of comments, I'm very impressed by the notion these days telling our young people, you know, or impressing upon our young people and for our young people that if they can see it, they can be it, which to your point is who we are and who we've always been. And the notion that, you know, learning about that can help propel our young people.
Right.
I was very fortunate. My other point point is that I was very fortunate that I learned a lot of things at home. You know, they weren't taught at school. I was very lucky that I had parents who were very conscientious about teaching us all of those things. We had books galore. I had basically a library in my home that had all kinds of knowledge there. And so a lot of what I learned, now that's not to say that as years have gone by, I've learned a lot more things that, that are being revealed all along. But yes, I think it's very important, especially, the trials and tribulations are one thing, but the important things that we should know that I think come as a burden to us is not knowing how prolific and educated that we have been over the centuries.
You make a good point, and I don't want to believe I want to move on, but you make a good point about us. The ignorance of our own history sometimes is what keeps us from, I believe, being able to truly celebrate it. You look real quick. You look at what's going on this month of February, which is the calendar expression of Black history, and I see all kinds of celebrations going on and activities and stuff. But as I would remind most of us, come March 1, we're still Black. we're still about same culture, and it should continue to go on and on. And so sometimes these celebrations, I think, bring highlight to it, bring attention to it. But does it really always address the true concern? To your point, is great. So thank you so much for that. I see a familiar face. I want to pull him right in right away. Brother Frazier, welcome. I'd love to hear your perspective.
Since I'm a little late, what was the general first question?
Oh, okay. The very first question is Black history still important within the Black community?
So I have a myriad of thoughts. So absolutely, we should never lose touch with or forget our history. But I do feel like what you just touched on and what Morgan Freeman has touched on, why do we have to be put into a cubbyhole of 1 month? You know, the working topic is that, well, you know, we're trying to celebrate Lincoln and we're trying to celebrate Frederick Douglass. Okay, I kind of see it as they don't want to see us on the streets having barbecues, celebrating all year long. So let's put it in the coldest month of the year, right? But getting back to, is it relevant? the fact that I'm always finding out something new, either family or just reading. For instance, remember the group, the Gap Band? Do you know what that stands for?
I gotta be honest now, I do not.
It's the streets in Tulsa, Green, Arch, and Pine.
Pine, right, okay.
Black Wall Street was. So all this time they're lifting up something most of us never knew about.
Right, right.
So we have to find these tidbits out when it comes to Black History Month, you know? But I do remember that being in the liner notes, but I had no idea that the Tulsa riots took place back when they took place.
Right. That has been a true eye-opener for many. How prolific that was, how wealthy that was, and then the destruction of it sounds very familiar. But the fact that it all existed was such a phenomenon that I think we sometimes underestimate that. Thank you so much for that. Let me go to Lit. May I get your perspective? I hope I got that right.
Yeah, that's Mike and Sarah from Connecticut.
Okay, nice. Welcome.
Roy for many years. Always commend him for his actions and commitment. What I will say is, see, we come from and Rory knows I'm long-winded, so I'm gonna try to be real brief. But we come from a stock of great kings and queens, orators, scientists, and engineers. And you know, when you look at where we are now and understanding the need for Black history is something that needs to go every day. It's something that people in our generation should be teaching our children of what we learn. And with the advent of the internet and all the other social media types, it shouldn't be as difficult as it is. It's about interest. It's about also understanding and having, you know, the populace as a whole. So it's become popular now to recognize HBCUs as a mainstream ground of institution and learning. So, you know, and they'll fall into the question that you'll bring up later in terms of the need to teach it adequately in the schools. But, you know, yes, with unequivocally, you know, is our history is something where we'll continue to just scratch the surface of what we've done over the course of time, whether it's Hannibal was a Black guy who knew, you know, and you know, it's without question something that we have been part of the creation of every society in the world, the Moors, to go all the way back. And it's just a matter of having that really be recognized and taught appropriately, and how we share that information, like the old times where they, sitting at the campfire or sitting around, and the storytellers. So who's the storyteller? So Rory is a consummate storyteller, and I'll leave it at that. And I'll leave it at
that. Having said that, leading into the storyteller, let me now bring on the storyteller, the elder of the group, the elder brother Roy Edwards.
I'm going to be very brief, but I just want to share that I am so glad that Gary came on, because Gary is in my travels, I've been quite a few places, and Gary was being modest in his first answer, because Gary is one of the most brilliant minds that I've ever met. And when I need to be enlightened, and I need to be corrected, and I need to be directed, that's who I go to. Michael Ansara also, I know he says he can be lengthy, but sometimes when we talk about length, it's the quality of what you are delivering to people that people call it lengthy, because it's a new saying that I've adopted, and Gary and Michael helped me with this. And I say, I am responsible for what I say, but I'm not responsible for what you understand. And so one of the things that we've been not diligent in is we haven't been diligent in providing that information for those generations who are coming behind us. We are up against so many things that are trying to prevent this from happening. And as we get into the show a little later, I want to thank Regina, who really was the one who poked me in a conversation that Regina and I have several conversations. So I'm going to say that, Regina, we talk all the time. So now you know my secret, who I be talking to. I talk to Regina. And so Regina was the one who poked me about something we're going to talk about a little later that is threatening our ability to share our history. And in the states for which many of you are living in right now, you may not even know this is brewing in your state. And so for us to believe that Black history is valuable and important, we also must understand the distractors and the detractors who are trying to take even the little small parts of us being able to stand up on a soapbox and share this information away from us. And so with that being said, I just want to say, is Black history important? It's very important to me. It's very important to all of us. But the one thing that I really wish, and I sent it out in my email, was that I wanted people to bring the children on, because I really wanted to hear from the children. Is it important to the children? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Because we can sit up here and talk about Black history all day, but if we're not sharing it with those who come behind us, then how important is it? Because, what the people say is, once you have a funeral, you don't see the things that you've acquired following you to the graveyard. And so the information also goes with you to the graveyard if you don't deposit it into something that you should be investing in your life. So with that said, I know our protocol is that for me not to talk, but I want to poke those two gentlemen. And I mean, everybody else is valuable, but I know, like I said, I know Gary's intellect, and I know Michael's intellect. And I hope that they can contribute more, because I know that they're going to bring such value to this conversation as we share it with other people. Those are information, and those are people that really need to be heard.
Thank you. As always, the elder always brings us back to the point and keeps us visualized from his history of living through the lifetime. Thank you very, very much, Elder Edwards. I would like to, Greg, would you care to comment on the subject matter to point? Okay, perhaps Greg is not interested in doing so. iPhone VVV, would you care to comment on any of the subject matter thus far? Then moving on to, is that Nephthys iPhone?
Hey, Coach Carter, how you doing?
Hey, Greg, how are you?
Hey, man. First of all, I'm glad to be here surrounding my brothers and sisters. I'm learning a lot in this short time. I think it's very important that Black history be alive in the Black community, because as a young Black man growing up, I wasn't always taught my Black history until I went to HBC college. That's where I learned all my Black history at. Of course, I went to Tuskegee Institute, and I learned about Booker T. Washington and George Washington Carver on what they contributed to the Black Americans, if I may say that, to the young Black Americans. So I feel like, Black history should stay alive, not only just in February. Black history should be taught 365 days a year, because there's a lot, like the brother said, there's a lot of Blacks who contribute in building this nation. So yes, I think it should be taught every day of the year.
Absolutely. Now, Greg is coming to you. He didn't say it, but he's coming from Atlanta, Georgia.
Sorry, guys.
That's okay. Just wanted to make sure people know that it is important that you say that. And again, I go back. I had a brief conversation with someone the other day, and just Saturday. I don't want to take away from the conversation, but I reminded them that who I am that person 365 days a year, 24/7. There is no category in which you can just say, I only exist in this time period. Nor does my culture, nor do my expectations, my desires and values, are they put into 28 days or 29 during leap year. It is all year long. So we are who we are. And let's be honest, I'm Black all year long. Through any other opportunity. So appreciate your thoughts.
Amen.
Let me go to, thank you very much. Let me go to James. Did you have any comment on the current subject matter? James, you're muted. You're muted, James. I can't hear you. James, you're muted. James, you are muted. Can't hear you, James. Yeah, you're muted. You're muted. You're muted. You're still muted.
You can't hear me.
No. There you are. Now I can hear you. Thank you very much. Would you first tell me where you're from?
I'm from Ocoee, actually, Orlando.
Okay. Yeah, that's right outside. Good. Thank you so much for joining us. Your comments.
Okay, I missed your question. I'm sorry. I was trying to get hooked up here. I don't know what I'm doing. So, what was your comment? I'll be glad to comment if I can.
The very first question was: is Black history still important within the Black community?
Oh, of course it is. Of course it is.
Okay.
And the thing, if you don't know your history, then it's a problem.
That's true. That is very true.
And there are so many people right now, young people, that just don't know. They just that all the stuff that's here now, they just act like it was just came out of nowhere. But so much went into that. Freedom marches, everything. Went for years, all the way back from the 60s. And they're enjoying the fruits of our labor, but they have no idea what our labor is. And they need to know that. They need to know that through Black history.
Very good point you make. iPhone VVV, did you have a comment? No, and then, no, that's not you. That was someone else. And then Nafky's iPhone, did you? I hope I'm saying that right. Did you have a comment?
What's going on, Coach Carter?
Hey, well, that's somebody I know. Thank you very much, sir. I didn't know that comment. Any comment?
Hey, brother, how you doing?
I'm good, Mr. P. Yeah, this is Coach Pickett. I'm in the Loganville, Georgia area. I'm probably the youngest person on here. Good, Mr. P. Yeah, this is definitely Black history. Definitely need Loganville, Georgia, shared more. That's for just in February, but I think it needs to be every month. So we need to celebrate. My opinion, I think we need to celebrate at least 2 people every single month. Like I said, I'm probably the youngest in here. I'm 34 years old, and I'm still learning my Black history. But I definitely was, raised on it and know a little bit. But these kids nowadays and the generation, they definitely need to know what's going on.
Very good point. Excellent point. I also see Brother Pearson. Welcome to the show. Would love to get your opinion. We're our very first question for this, and welcome back. Good to see you.
How you doing? I'm sorry, I had another meeting at the same time.
Okay. That's all right. I'm glad you could make it. Our first question we're discussing is Black history still important within the Black community?
Yes, it definitely is. I think that, speaking for myself, I think I've learned Black history myself in the last additional Black history. And I'm college educated. My mother was college educated. My father and their parents were college educated. But it's still amazing myself coming from that background, still how much I'm learning every day. I think that as we learn more about our history in the past, we can understand and predict things for the future. And that's probably one of the more important things about understanding your history is understanding how you got where you are, and then coming up with strategies on how to move forward in the future.
One of my concerns is that sometimes we put so much emphasis on the month that we don't do anything throughout the year. I think someone had said earlier, it's a constant ongoing situation that needs to be taught in any environment and any opportunity, that we do not hide it, but show its efforts and talk about it and educate not only those who look like us, but those who do not look like us, how important our relevance is. To that point. Now, does anybody else have any comment on question one? If not, I'm going to move on to question two.
Let me just chime in 1 second. I feel like this.
Yes.
It's kind of hard when you just say that Black history is being a finite event, a finite series of events, because every day when you turn on the news, you see that this is the first Black person to have done this. This is the first Black person in this position. This is the first Black person elected here. I learned something in terms of when you use satellite phones and computer programs and the whole thing. Every bit of technology, every bit of the things that we use on a day-to-day basis was created by a Black man or a Black woman, more than we know, and it's coming out every day and acknowledged more every day. So that's why I think sometimes these kids are picking it up, but they don't really get the significance of it and the struggle that it took and the ideas that people are still learning about and talking about, but more so the need of instilling in them the ability that they can accomplish, because that's when the cycle continues to grow and it becomes more of a norm, because now it's an oddity. It's just a celebration and not really given the proper homage as it should. We understand because my grandmom came here and she was a maid and a cleaning lady for years. Never was able to use a mop and clean people's floors on her hands and knees. And one of the people that I met that was instrumental in giving me a mindset of wanting to be an orator was Shirley Chisholm, because she was a councilwoman in Brooklyn and the first Black woman at that point to run for president. And I met her and my grandma knew her. So those things have great significance to me. And, is it a need? Yes. It just needs, young people really need to understand that the things that they're using and where it came from, and more so to inspire them to do more. And that will give it more value. And then it won't be a debate.
That's a good point. Excellent point. I believe instead of Black history, we need Black education. And we don't put that into a 28-day period. We put that into a daily existence of sharing, with the social media being as much as we share on social media. I too am learning information from just watching social media, because I'm on there because I work with a lot of youth and I'm hearing what they're saying. I want to see what they're looking at in some cases. And there is a great deal of information being shared there. So it's not Black history, it's Black education, from my point of view. Anybody else, any other comment on question one? If not, I'm going to move on to question two. Okay, question two. Are Black personal and professional relationships still relevant in the Black community? Now think about that. Are Black personal and professional relationships still relevant in the Black community? who would like to go? Let me go back. Let me start with Richard. What's your thoughts on that, Richard?
You know, I don't. My personal opinion basically is they're important to a certain point.
Okay.
You know, I've been in the industry for quite a while, in the manufacturing industry, and I've tried to bring a lot of, you know, my friends and things like that into my arena of knowledge and stuff like that, to get them ahead and stuff like that, you know. And I've had a lot of them just, you know, turn it away, you know, and that has affected my personal relationship with them, because now I have a distrust for them, because, you know, here I am trying to help you out, and you basically turned your back on me and went in another direction. You know, where I've had other personal, you know, relationships that have turned out, you know, very well, you know, with professional things, you know, when I, like, as far as coaching, you know, I've had friends that have brought their kids to me to coach. I actually coach track and field. So, you know, and our relationships have been perfect. You know, we've had that personal relationship, we've had that professional relationship, and we keep the two separate.
Richard, may I ask, in that experience, are you finding that, or if I understand you correctly, forging that relationship within your Black relations, you're finding it easier to do it outside of that?
No, I find it hard to get the African Americans that I know or that I associate with to get involved in the industry that I'm involved in.
Oh, okay, in that industry,
right?
Okay,
you know, and basically basically what I do is I'm the director of quality assurance and regulatory affairs for a company that actually we actually make COVID tests.
Okay.
And I find a lot of Blacks do not want to get involved in that industry, and I have a hard time trying to find them. You know, I'm looking for people now to bring in, and the first thing I do is I go to Black people. I even put posts on Facebook to try to get Black people involved, and I just can't get them. I just can't get them, you know. And even, like I said, my personal friends, I've even gone out to them. You know, here's a position I can give you. You know, if you don't have something, and it's backfired on me.
I'm sorry to hear that, but I do applaud your effort, because I find that very important within our community. So thank you for sharing that. Gary, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, once again, Rory, thank you for your shout outs earlier, but in some sense, in these questions, I'm fairly simplistic. The answer to that question is yes, both personal and professional. The question becomes, for me, slightly different. And I think the brother who just spoke touched on it. Can you bring intellectual and spiritual honesty to those relationships? And what does that look like? Because you talk about pardon me?
Give me an example.
Oh, example of intellectual relationship. Am I being true?
Yeah.
Am I being true?
Okay.
Am I divulging everything that I need to divulge to you? How much am I holding back? I used to have a rule and regulation, to use the term respectfully, with my staff. And I used to tell them, never allow me to be blindsided by information.
Yeah, absolutely.
The standard rule.
Yeah, that's a standard rule in any group dynamic.
And when I find that somebody is not divulging or telling me what's going on, it creates an issue. It creates an issue with my personal relationship, if I have one, because it's going to be personal. And then it creates a professional issue. And so, yes, once again, simplistically, yeah, the relationships are always important. But do we bring intellectual and spiritual honesty to the table? We end up lying to ourselves. And so somebody mentioned in the other question, the issue of education. You might have said that, and somebody else said it, in terms of educating our young people. Well, we're not necessarily doing that. Even in response to this question, we are not teaching our young people, how do you bring that truth? And so the Black community right now is very fractured. We don't know where to go. We don't know what to do.
And we are seeking clarity, but with someone, so there is an awful amount of confusion out there, is what you're saying, correct?
Well, yeah, we've confused our children. We got caught into, like we deal with this issue, for example, of progress. And if we look at progress from a person who has been a slave, meaning that they view themselves as a slave, because that's not a word that I use in reference to our people. but they view themselves as a slave. So if you take that yardstick of that person who views themselves coming out of that mentality of slavery, progress looks great. But if you use that yardstick of a person who views themselves as not having been slaves, shouldn't never have been enslaved, they are free-minded, liberated person, progress is very small.
Okay.
We haven't moved far at all. And we keep lying to ourselves. And so the first thing, do we become honest with ourselves first? If I can be honest with Gary Turner, then I know I can be honest with my brother you, or my sister on the phone, or anybody on this phone, because I'm going to first be, because the first lie we are taught is what? The first lie, the first recipient of any lie is yourself. So we're not having these broader conversation in terms of how we deal with the community and build that community up, since we are living in a time of devastation right now and not knowing where to go.
Interesting, Gary. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Catherine, your thoughts?
This is interesting. And I want to try to really quickly go through, so my personal experience to come back to the notion of Black relationships. I was born in Washington, D.C. In the early 50s. So I remember, colored only signs and things like that around Virginia and Maryland as a kid. Living in a Black community, going to a predominantly Black school. When I was junior high school age, actually just before junior high school age, we moved to New Jersey, central New Jersey, because of my father's job and position. We ended up in an all-white community. We were the only family in our neighborhood. My elementary school, in 6th grade at the time, there were 2 Black children in the whole school. I was one of 2 in the whole school. So my whole perspective at 11 years old changed and was like, okay, so now what do I do? And it was very interesting because they asked me questions like, do Black people celebrate Christmas and things like that? These folks who now by the time we got to junior high and high school, we were about 10% Black population in that particular. It's a suburb of Trenton, is where I grew up. So that whole perspective about, and yes, so the Black relationships I had were very important because I wanted to make sure I was understood. But in the process of that, also, the folks who were not Black understood me and who I was and where I was coming from, thanks to what I alluded to earlier about the education I had at home. Fast forward one more time to college, where I went to I went to Michigan State University with a freshman class of 7,000 people. My first roommate was white. My focus at that point was, okay, how do I pull this down to a workable relationship group of people, that I'm not just passing, along the campus and in classes. So I ended up, thank goodness, with a Black roommate. So we related. And then I sought out sorority life. And that's a whole nother story I can tell you about my sorority legacy. Sure. And so that became, a community in and of itself. My sorority and the other, sororities and fraternities. So yes, in my perspective is that, yes, that's very important. Not that I have not had lots of relationships, and then that carried over into my profession. I was in broadcasting. And when I started in broadcasting, there are very few women and not a whole lot of Black folks. So, there I was again as a double minority, looking for, any relationship we had. And of course, anytime I ended up in a place where there are other Black folks, we bonded because, because. So, that's sort of my life experience of that and why I absolutely believe, that's very important. Having now moved to the South Side of Chicago, where I see mostly Black people every day. I have to say, after all these years, it's it's a very satisfying. I'll say satisfying lifestyle. So I'm sorry it took so much time, but I just wanted to
that's okay.
Just
that's
explain how yeah. So.
But that's what you and Gary both talk about, that idea of reaching back, reaching out. I think Richard also mentioned that we're reaching out, and I think that's that is probably the most important thing. Now, how well it's received, that's a different story. But the effort of reaching back to help one another, I too have been in a management position. First thing I did is went to my pool of people to try to bring them along, those who chose to, and then some who did not. Some of my best relationships in terms of professional have been non-Black, but I still valued most and felt more comfortable, to Gary's point about being honest, trustworthy within those relationships of those others. Let me go on. Let me ask you, Brother Fraser, your thoughts on this matter.
So I try to keep a tribe that's diverse, not diverse so much in ethnicity, but I'm talking young, old, various industries, because I need to be aware of what's going on virtually as much as I can with everything that's going on. So that means women, that means, different professions, acting. I'm in insurance, right? So in the financial world, like my son's age group, entertainment, he's an editor for GQ. So I want those relationships in different levels, if you will.
Okay.
Helps me stay abreast of things.
Absolutely. That's a great, thank you for sharing. Brother Pearson.
Could you repeat the question again?
Are Black personal and professional relationships still relevant within the Black community?
No, I think it is. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Now you go ahead. I'm learning, brother. I'm learning.
Okay. Mr. P, we're talking to Brother Pearson right now, so I'll come right back to you. Go ahead, Brother Pearson.
Okay, go ahead.
You know what? As I go about my day-to-day activities, I try. I don't go overboard in terms of looking for people to support. Just being honest with what I do with my business. It's more or less like my past relationships. But what I do though is, as I develop those Black relationships and deal with the Black contractors and other people I deal with, I take a little bit more personal interest in maybe trying to help guide them, direct them, lead them, or assist them in any way I can. But my first thought is, I need to hire somebody Black. It's about, I need to get somebody over there that's going to do me a good job. Black, white, Mexican, anything. And one thing when you talk about community now, I live in a community that's about, say, 30% Black. So, but I own property around town, and I own a lot more property in the Black community than I do in any other community. So I am somewhat tied to the community, and I am somewhat sensitive to the issues of those. And I do care about what's going on in those communities, even when I can't say vote because I'm out of that district or whatever, or for city councilman or whatever else I do. I still feel a natural bond and connection with what's going on in the community.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for that. That's interesting. James Crawford, what's your opinion? You're muted. James, you're muted.
Can you hear me?
Okay. Now I can hear you.
I'm a little bit out of the picture for this particular reason. Number one, because of this COVID, I spent a lot of time at home. I'm very, very susceptible to it because of my age and health factors. But even before that, I have been retired. I have not been in the work field I retired in 1977. So I've been out here a while. Every now and then I will take a job here and there, but I haven't even done that in more than 12 years. So I don't have a lot of interaction with people in the business world. Probably the most action I've had is when I was on the program we had for prostate cancer, the African American Men's Health Summit. I was in there for about 18 years, and it's a lot of communication then, but we stopped doing that a couple of years ago. So basically, I've just been kind of sitting here on the sideline and relaxing.
Okay.
But so what's going on right now, I'm probably so far out of touch that I probably couldn't really give you a good answer because I don't do a lot of socializing, and it's the people I do associate with are just like very close friends and family.
But you do value, you are saying that it is still valuable though, whether you, regardless of the number of people that you would have been involved with, do you think if you were there, would it have value to you?
Oh, absolutely. You learn.
Okay.
I mean, if someone has been through something and you can learn from them, they'll tell you, because you may be doing it completely wrong. You think you're doing it right and you might be wrong.
Yeah.
You may say things that you think are normal, but to some people they're offensive. And you won't know that until you're around people and they tell you about it. I mean, there's some things I've said that I didn't think was wrong, but somebody said, you don't say that anymore.
Right.
And when about old school, I am from old school, okay? And I was born, the young lady said she's born in the 50s. I was born in the very early 40s. So
yeah, Brother Edwards can relate to that.
I'm way out of touch with a lot of folks. But yeah, as far as I'm knowing, and even I've tried to get, after I retired, I talked to groups, I talked to kids in school. I was in law enforcement. I tried to get them to try to have a better relationship with the Black community and the officers. I tried to get both sides of the story. And sometimes it worked, and sometimes they say, yeah, okay. Because they basically didn't believe what I was saying could happen.
I get that point, believe me. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. But Mr. P, your point of view.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I think it's very important to have good, positive role models in the community so that we can support one another, so we can build one another up. You know, we've been torn down so much. So where could we turn but to our community, but to the positive role models that live in our communities? So it is important.
Okay. All right, Brother Pickett. You may have said, Mike, did you have a comment on that?
Yeah, see, my mindset is, or my background, I've been an educator. I've worked on a college campus from the time I graduated from college until I recently retired after 33 years, 6 months and 22 days working at a state university plantation.
You got it down pat, Mike.
Oh, I had a countdown for years, but for first off, this is the need, is it necessary for role models and mentorships and professional relationships? Unequivocally. My mindset and my background, Rory knows, when I first went to Central Connecticut State University, they're the largest state university in terms of enrollment in Connecticut. And it had 14,000 students, and the population of people of color was 4.4%. No scholarship dollars, nothing. In a matter of, I was there from 95 to 2000. We increased the enrollment from 4% to about 15%, created 4 scholarship programs, did a lot of things, recruitment programs in the schools, bringing 8th graders to college at a time when it wasn't fashionable. The need for role models, and the reason why I've always taken the mindset of doing some of the things I did is I look back at the people that struggled to put me in that position, whether I knew their names or not. The struggles are real when you see the videos. I'm a child of the 60s, born in 1960, and that was a time of great change in the United States and continues to this day. Maybe not at the same, well, it's become more fashionable now, more noticeable now. There's something to pay respect to. But there were people that suffered and died to give me an opportunity to speak and have a platform and to conjugate my words in a manner that are powerful. I look at role models that I've had, and I got to shout people out. My grandmother. I look at a gentleman named Carson Carr, who got me working with Upward Bound programs in Syracuse, New York, at Rollins College, and that's how I got into education. I look at Johnny Floyd, who was the first African American admission director in New England, and hired me at Central to do recruiting at a job that no one was able to do in the fashion that I did, and to this day is unparalleled. No disrespect to anybody. I look at a Hakeem Salahuddin, who also spearheaded stuff at the university. I look at a Charles Jones, who was one of 9 African-American athletic directors in the country that brought me over to athletic department at Central. So I can say that the impact that we all can have, and we have, whether you recognize it or not, in elevating those around you, whether they're young. I'm at a stage now where 60 years old, and I'm asking those young people to mentor me because they know to bring me up to speed, to keep things contemporary, and to keep the things that I can say and do to be relevant. So is there a need? Unequivocally, until your last breath. It's almost without putting pressure and just a mindset. I would ask folks to ask them, what is their obligation? Because many of us wouldn't be in the position that we are right now for people who did things sight unseen and sacrifice that we don't even know. And that's what trying to find their names and trying to give them proper homage. And so I'll leave it at that. It is necessary and it's valued, and it does make a difference.
Thank you so much for sharing. I do think, without a doubt, all of us are saying within the same that you're and I think the examples that were provided are very real examples. And working in corporate America or in whatever industry you work in, I do believe, especially if you're a leadership position or management position, in my opinion, I think most of us would think that I want to help the next brother along, but that's an opportunity that they have to take advantage of. I do think we have to be sincere and truthful about, here, I'm offering you this, but let me tell you what you're about to face. Let me tell you the difficulties in which what you're going to be embarking on and coming into this, and I need your help. But I think you do have to be honest about it. I think it's relative, both personal and professional. I have professional relationships that are not a part of my personal relationship. And while I think I would like to make them the same, sometimes it doesn't work that way. So in my opinion, and in consummating what you all have said, I agree that it is very important. To me, I think so. And I think generally what we're saying, I think we can agree that the question is, yes, it's about how you do that. Okay, let me, anybody else have any other comment they'd like to make before we go on to question 3? A couple of people I have not heard from. Shoot, I don't see you up, so maybe you just want to listen, and that's fine, and we're glad you're here. Brother Pickett, I'm going to give you one more opportunity to see if you were there and you had anything you wanted to contribute. If not, then I will move on. Okay, all minds and bodies are satisfied. Question number 3. Is Black harmony, solidarity still the motivation of the Black community? Is Black harmony / solidarity still the motivation of the Black community? Before we actually get into that, I want you to think about that, but I want to give you some food for thought. I want to introduce a couple of videos. One, first video will be on critical race theory, and the second one will be on an action that is taking place in Florida called the Florida SB 148 Individual Freedoms. So here they are, and then I'll get back to you right after that.
Okay, why are states rushing to inscribe laws banning these conversations about the history of our country? To understand why the critical race theory has become such a flashpoint in the culture, it is important to understand what it is and what it is not. Opponents fear that the critical race theory admonishes all white people from being oppressed while classifying all Black people as hopelessly oppressed victims. These fears have spurred school boards and state legislators from Tennessee to Ohio to ban teachings about racism in classrooms. However, there is a fundamental problem. These narratives about critical race theory are gross exaggerated of the theological framework. The broad brushes that being applied to CRT is puzzling to academics, including some of the scholars who coined and advanced this framework. Critical race theory does not attribute racism to white people as individuals or even to entire groups of people. Simply put, critical race theory states that U.S. social institutions such as criminal justice system, education system, the labor market, housing market, and the healthcare system are laced with racism, embedded in laws, regulations, rules, and procedures that lead to differential outcomes by race. Sociologists and other scholars have long noted that racism can exist without racists. However, many Americans are not able to separate their individual identity as Americans from social institutions that govern us. These people perceive themselves as the system. Consequently, they interpret calling social institutions racist as calling them racist personally. It speaks to how normative radical ideology is to American identity that some people just can't separate the two. They are also the people who may recognize America's racist past, but have bought into the false narrative that the U.S. is now an equitable democracy. They are simply unwilling to remove the blind spots obscuring the fact that America is still not great for everyone. Scholars and activists who discuss CRT are not arguing that white people living now are to blame for what white people did in the past. They are saying that white people living now have a moral responsibility to do something about how racism still impacts all of our lives today. This is the bill that is being passed, the Individual Freedom Act, SB 148 in Florida.
Hello, my name is Christina Forrest. I am a member of the Florida Democratic Black Caucus. However, what I'm going to speak to you about today are my own thoughts and my own views, and not necessarily that of any organization that I may be a part of or that I represent. I wanted to talk about what's commonly referred to as the White Comfort Bill. It's actually the Stop Woke Act. And I'm sorry, I've got notes here, so I don't want to say anything wrong or incorrect. But I just want to talk about how detrimental this bill is to our community, to the Black community. The Stop Woke Act is known as HB 7. It's got a Senate companion bill, SB 148. It's being really fast-tracked through the Florida legislature right now. Basically, it's a two-pronged bill. One is it would affect how teachers can teach about a number of subjects, but basically anything that causes anybody to feel discomfort can sue the school, their teacher, the school system. And then it's got another aspect that affects businesses. Before I go into that bill, I want to talk about who wrote it. This is what is considered an ALEC model bill. It's being put forth through the legislature. Ron DeSantis is really behind it, and I cannot tell you what a sorry excuse for a governor he is. And that is, again, my own personal opinion, and I want to say it here very loudly and proudly. This is a horrific bill. So, and I'm actually really sorry that we even have to talk about it. I'm sorry that we're here and we have to discuss it. You know, Florida right now, in my personal opinion, should be talking about the lack of affordable housing. Florida should be talking about, you know, how kids have been impacted due to COVID in schools. You know, Florida should be talking about a massive teacher shortage, and this bill doesn't help that. This bill doesn't help anything. This bill is just horrible. It's a rallying cry for Republicans to come out and vote, get them behind DeSantis, get them behind, you know, some of the other down ballot. The bill prohibits teaching anything about sex or race or origin that is considered to be inherently privileged. You can't mention oppression or saying anything is inherently racist. The bill for businesses it's basically going after businesses. If you think about how cultural sensitivity is taught, if you think about how different schools may be impacted directly by, anything from it being an LGBTQ community, from it being a Latino community, from it being predominantly Black community. Cultural sensitivity is basically taken out of it, and you cannot talk about it. In addition to that, DeSantis wants monitoring of all the classrooms so that parents have a way to fight this bill. And mind you, this is an ALEC bill. So an ALEC bill is basically brought up out of this supposed nonprofit think tank. What they do is they create these, they write tons and tons of bills for Republicans, both on the national level and on the state levels across the nation. And what they do is they take nonprofit money, but they meet with corporations. They write up the bills. They present these bills to different Republicans, and then the Republicans present these bills. These bills are going to basically take out any sort of legislature out of corporations. ALEC bills are known to be huge union busters. ALEC bills are known to really go after Black community, LGBT communities, communities of color, anything like that. ALEC bills are absolutely opposed, harmful to our communities. And it really is a slap in the face for everything we have worked for. If you think about Ron DeSantis is really putting this forth as saying, we're not going to teach CRT. First of all, CRT is not taught in any public school anywhere across the state of Florida. So that's just a mask. What this is saying is we can't teach Black history. What this is saying is we are going to whitewash Black history. What this is saying is any teacher who has an honest conversation with any student about Black history, we're going to go after you. And those parents that may feel uncomfortable, that may disagree with a teacher, has an opportunity to sue. And this bill doesn't work for us, meaning that if you are a Black parent, this bill is not going to work for you if you say, hey, I'm uncomfortable because they didn't properly teach my kid. I'm uncomfortable because they didn't tell the truth. That's what this bill does. ALEC has been behind some of the stand your ground bills that were across many states. That's the same people writing this bill. And because we don't have a Democratic majority in either the state House legislature or the state Senate, mind you, every Democrat in the state House legislature is vehemently fighting against this bill, but it is being rushed through, smashed through against party lines. So if we want to see a change, we need to vote. And that means not just voting for the president. That means voting for the governor. That means voting for your state legislature. That means leaving no lines blank, because this is the kind of foolishness that happens when we do that. We really, really, really need more representation within our state legislature to be able to combat some of this horrible foolishness that is coming out. And it's just one thing after another. Another point to the bill that I definitely want to make sure everybody is aware of is that we talked about the impact for teaching and teaching in K through 12, but there's also an employment aspect to the bill. So basically that means that any employment practice training that can make an individual feel guilty because of racism or other issues is also subject to this legislation. So that means that, let's say you walked into a sexual harassment training for your job or something like that, and a person, let's say a male, came out and was like, I really felt like that was geared towards me as a man, making me feel uncomfortable. They then have grounds to go forward and sue that corporation. So when you are thinking about things like cultural sensitivity training, if you are thinking about sexual harassment training, if you are thinking about any of those trainings, those are all subject to these bills in Florida. And it is not Ron DeSantis is really opening up the door, as well as the Florida legislature, who is backing him, is really opening up the door for a wealth of lawsuits within the state of Florida. A lot of workplaces, may include things like LGBTQ plus safety. Again, opening up a door for somebody to say, well, that makes me feel uncomfortable, so I am going to sue. Or again, like we said, sexual harassment training, or cultural sensitivity, whether you're working with, maybe different ages, different cultures, different things, and how you may approach that with some sensitivity. They are looking at trying to take all of that away. And so really for large corporations, this is going to be a huge risk. When we go back and talk about the schools have already preemptively started to ban books because they don't want to be held liable because they see this passing. So they are already starting there. Certain organizations have already, I'm sure, looked at, what type of training do they do annually? And then the impact this may have on the military and military communities is something that is really going to have to be looked at as well.
Okay, just a reminder, our question was, and great information. Our question was, is Black harmony, solidarity still the motivation of the Black community? Having heard those two pieces there, should provoke some thought. I want to start with Regina, because Regina brought this idea of the Individual Freedom Act, this bill, to the attention of Brother Edwards, who then brought it to me, and we all got excited. So I can't wait to hear from Sister Regina. If you would share your thoughts.
Well, she said everything. I mean, that was very, very, I mean, she was extremely, extremely thorough. What I would say is, gosh, would you ask the question again for me, please?
The question is Black harmony, solidarity still the motivation of the Black community?
If it's not, it should be, especially in Florida and where we are with everything that the young lady just spoke of. Because in the workplace, what this bill does is attack any diversity programs that a company may have. And of course, a smaller company really can't afford to have any lawsuits. And so what you're talking about, a company that, if they're teaching anti-discrimination, or they want to teach diversity, or they want to teach unconscious bias, those little microaggressions you may experience sometimes, that is setting a course of action for someone that is now uncomfortable or disgruntled. And so do they do away with the diversity programs? I think more than ever, it's a time for us as Black women and Black men to stick together, to be together, and to discuss the issues that we may be having in the workplace. And as it relates to our children, they are, what this bill does is chill any discussion in any child's classroom about race and about gender. And again, it goes back to my earlier point that teaching in the home, in the church, our history, how important we are to history, who we are as kings and queens is even more important, because as these kids grow up, they have to know who they are in their Blackness, or in their color, in their brownness, whatever the case may be. So to answer your question, I think we need to pull together and continue to be together. And as what she also said too was, voting in the down ballot is so much more important, I think, especially in our case, when we have the governor that we have, that's so important. And again, teaching our children what this is about, why it's important to vote. It starts now.
Great point. I want to move on. Catherine, your thoughts.
I have so many thoughts on this, and it's interesting that she mentioned ALEC, because before this started, I looked at the bill. And my first thought was, I wonder if this is one of those ALEC bills. I was a TV producer. I was the political producer at an NBC O&O in Philadelphia for 30 years. So I researched and saw a lot of these things happen. I was in touch with politicians all the time. That's why I know about ALEC, which is the American Legislative Exchange Council. They call themselves nonpartisan, but as was spoken, most of the legislation, they essentially get together as a think tank, write this proposed legislation, and then send it all over the country to local legislatures and governmental bodies. And I think PBS did a documentary or a special on it. If you want to look it up and see how this works out, because it happens. And what happens is you have this same language introduced all over the country in municipalities, and people who are local don't even know that this is what's going on. They just got, oh, my legislature, they introduced this thing, and now they're doing this. To your question though about pulling together, I've got a couple of really key points. I saw something somebody put on Facebook recently, what things should we make sure we teach children that we're not teaching them now? And the thing that's always been important to me that I learned in my household, my parents were college educated, their parents were college educated. We were taught logic in my household. If you do this, this is what will happen. Consequences. So my answer was teach the children logic and critical thinking. Critical thinking, which is then goes to my notion of coming together as Black folks. Opinions and facts are two different things. We can differ on opinions, and everybody who knows me know I have an opinion about everything.
Here.
I try to do my research though and have some fact-based reasoning for why my opinion. Some things are just my opinion just because I feel a certain way. I'm not gonna be that high and mighty that's not me. But that's where I think I see us not coming together in a way that I wish we could, because you have people. Listen, I have folks in my own family who I disagree with about political stuff, and I'm at a loss to explain how they come to the conclusions they come to, again based on facts. So those are the things that are critical to me in the notion of, can we be together even though we may have different opinions? But please, let's not get lost in the facts. And I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't know how, again, a certain set of things, and then you say, well, but this is how I feel about it. Okay, that's cool. But can we not be so divided that then we're at odds with each other all the time? And that, that pains me. So.
And I think to your point, as we move on, part of my question would be, do we still have a common goal? We're all talking about individuality. Do we, even though I have my individual goals and things that I want to achieve, and I think that helps us grow as a people, but have we lost our common vision? Do we still have a common vision? Interesting point. I want to go to Brother Richard. Do you have any your thoughts on the matter?
I go back to like the early 80s, and I remember when David Duke was running for office. And at that time, he got, basically, kicked out of the political world, but he made a statement where he told all his Klan members to make sure they got in positions of power, get into legislature, get into all these different positions. And they did. And we're seeing the results of that right now. Because,
very much so.
All these different laws that are being passed and everything, they're to oppress us. They're to take us back to the 60s. So it's something that, as a community, we definitely need to come together, and my brother can attest to this. He's been an advocate. Rory is my brother. He's been an advocate for the community for years. And, my personal experiences with community, I told you my personal experience with, trying to hire people. I've also had the same things as a coach, where some of the Black people that I go into the neighborhoods. I'll go down to South Central LA and try to get athletes. And I've been chased out of South Central LA by the gangbangers and whatnot, because they don't want me coming in there, taking their athletes taking those guys out of the hood. And I've watched other communities. I live in a very diverse area, in California. So I've watched like especially third world country people. You know, I've watched like the Mexicans, how they come together. I've watched the Peruvians come together. I've watched, you know, all these different groups, you know, the Jamaicans come together. But us as Black people, we never do that. You know, we'll come together for a little bit and then we, you know, we're into our own thing. We want to get our own goals and hit those goals and we forget everybody else. So I think it's important that we come together, but it's just difficult to get to that position.
It is still a struggle. Brother Frazier.
Curse is not working tonight too well. You know, I just want to piggyback on what Richard just said, and every observation I make is connected to a movie or music or something. 1974, the New Birth had an album called Coming From All Ends, right? And I kind of feel like the harmony is kind of coming from all ends. We're fractured, and you can have opinions, and you can have thoughts, and you can have facts, and it's like never the twain shall meet, and they just cross and intersect. So you just feel a little bit disillusioned sometimes if that ever will gel. At least I do. But I have hope.
You have hope. Gotta keep hope. But do you do agree that solidarity and some type of harmony is necessary for us to further our agenda?
It's essential.
Okay. Great point. Thank you, Brother Mike.
Wow. First, I would say this: is it necessary? Unequivocally, because it's a matter of survival.
Okay.
Really, you know, if you put it in the most basic sense, it's a matter of survival of self, of family. You know, the development of community is essential. As time passes, it's not. It seems to go in cycles. So you know, if you look at life and you look at our community as a mathematical equation, we'll constantly just have to try to figure out how to turn the negatives into a positive, and to make it work in a fashion, you know, that's amenable and humane, and have a conscious conscience, You know, I always refer back to ancestors, you know, because if it wasn't for people, and I can name mentors and role models, what have you, that put me in a position that to speak truth, like a Rory, you know, to speak truth, to sometimes put yourself in a position where no one is willing to listen or understand at the moment, but they may reap the benefits of some of the things that you did. So, you know, it's a matter of also what's your purpose. So, my perspective is just a little bit different in terms of what the motivation is. But like I say, it's a matter of survival. It really is, of intellect, of culture, of contribution, and you know, the last thing I would say is we talk about harmony in the community. There was a game that I did where I brought up North Carolina Central to play Central Connecticut in football. And I asked the coach, would he come up and bring his bands? And he said, yes. And I go, well, we're on to something. So sitting there, he says, so I said, well, this could be a week-long reflection on the isms, you know, the synergy between athletics and academics, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, well, that should have a name. And I was eating my lunch and I took a sip of the soda and I said, I got it. I said, let's call it the Harmony Classic. And he goes, why? I said, because I drank a sip of Coca-Cola, and you know the jingle, I like to give the world a Coke and live in perfect harmony. I'll end with one thing: the need for us to understand the dynamics that the power structure will always separate and delineate us to be less than. You can look at those folks right now. We're in a stage in the world, we're at a watershed point where what they're doing in Ukraine, behind the scenes, there are Africans, people of the African diaspora, athletes, people going to law school, going to medical school, that are Black and brown folks trying to evacuate. And news reports coming saying that even in Ukraine, they're being told they have to wait. So no matter what, we're always in a constant struggle, you know, to be accepted. And and to be respected. If no one can do that, then who else can we rely on but each other? Ultimately, when the fan starts blowing, and I'll refer back to this, like the Public Enemy song, "Fight the Power." That's almost what it is. It's strength in numbers.
Amen. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate that. Mr. P, your perspective.
My perspective on that is that let's go back to slavery. It was one common goal that our ancestors were fighting for, and that was to be free. And I want to go back also to, they wanted to be free because they was fighting for one common goal, and that's to be free from slavery. And by the brother in California, I tip my hat out to you. When you was in Compton, you weren't there to hurt nobody. You were there to help our brothers. But now today, there's no goal, Coach Carter. There's no goal. It's like my dad always said, man for himself and God for us all. We fighting against each other, which we shouldn't have to. We should be working together. And if we were to take one step back to when our ancestors was out there in the cotton field, picking cotton, that right there should let us know we need to get on one common goal, and that just to help each other. Thank you.
Very well said. Thank you very much. Brother James Crawford, your thoughts.
You listen to some of the comments and go way back a little bit, is that as a group, this is going way back, we have just never, ever trusted one another to be a solid group. If we did, we could change so much. And right now, there's so many things we can do economically, but we guys or athletes will not do it. For instance, right now, there's a big thing in the NFL. You got 32 teams and one black coach. 70% of the league is black. If ever, in I don't think I'll ever say in my lifetime, the black athletes are 70%, at least 60%, I'm like 80% say, look, until we get some more black coaches, some black general managers, we're not going to play. But they're not going to do it. But it'll make all the difference in the world. I think about the bus boycott down, I think it was in Montgomery, where black folks started walking every day. They would not take the bus, and the bus company was losing money. And the next thing you know, things changed. But we just have never had that solidarity that we need. And I don't know what is it. It goes back to the old days of the house Negro, the field Negro. They never got together. They had like us not trusting each other. And I think that's has so much to do with it. And we have so much power. We really do.
Yeah.
And we're just
collectively.
Yes.
Great point you make there. Thank you very much for that observation. I appreciate that. Brother Pearson. Brother Pearson.
Yeah, we started out the conversation talking about from understanding our history and knowing our history. And I'm losing my train of thought. Okay. Yeah, we started out talking about
Brother Pearson, you're on mute. Coach Carter, you're on mute also.
Hold on a minute. All right, am I mute? Am I okay now?
Yeah, you're okay now. Coach Carter is on mute. Okay.
All right. What I was saying was that if you understand our history, you'll understand the evolution of what we're going through right now. Okay. Whenever we've taken 2 or 3 steps forward in the past, the counterculture, whatever, has done things to take us back and set us back. What I hate to hear people say is that how we don't have no identity now as a community, how we don't have all these things now as a community, because our community now is diverse. We all have a lot of different interests. I still think there's strength in numbers, but it's unrealistic, like our community or like any community, to be able to come together now because there's so many different opportunities, there's so many different issues, there's so many different fronts that we're all living on and fighting on. Because even when you say community, it's a community where I live or it's community, the Black community.
Mm-hmm.
So even it's just impossible for us, if you understand our history, to expect us to be where we were then. Because if we were where we were then, we would also be easier to target, easier to discriminate against, easier to deny opportunity, because we'd be all in one little fishbowl. We'd be easy to pluck off.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're definitely more diverse now. Perhaps not diverse enough, but we are definitely more diverse now. Brother Gary, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this as we're coming to a close. Brother Gary, if you would share your thoughts.
Yeah, very quickly. First of all, let me apologize to everybody because I thought my image would be up tonight, and I guess it's not. At least I don't see it. So my apologies to everybody for that. Number two, though, in response to your question, the answer once again for me is yes on both of those. But number two or three, I really appreciate the comments of everyone on this question, but especially my two sisters that are on the phone. Really appreciate that. One of the things is that we refer to it, sometimes we forget the lessons of Big Mama and Big Daddy. Big Mama taught us opinions are like, everybody got one. How much is yours worth? Not a damn thing. Now that comes out of the institution of slavery, because they used to say, ask those slaves, this whole slave master, so to speak, the plantation owner, should I say, would come down there with opinion. Big Mama was very clear on that particular point. So we missed that. Number two, I appreciate the fact of when we talked about, and so let me give you my background. I am a lawyer by education, training, and practice a whole lot of years ago. I'm 60 to be 69 this year. And so my sister mentions the issue in terms of factual-based analysis versus opinion. I tell people all the time, I really don't give a damn about your opinion. I don't care about my opinion. I do care about a factual analysis. And we can get to that factual-based analysis. We have to struggle to get there. So as Black people, we have to retrain ourselves in the way that we talk and in the language that we use to communicate with each other. And I don't want to be disrespectful to anybody when I'm talking to them. Certainly on this phone, and I'm not being. But other people I talk to, and they get upset sometimes in terms of speaking to the truth to them. As a Howard University trained attorney, let me speak very quickly on critical race theory. I graduated from law school in 1982. Under the dean of the law school at that time was a guy by the name of Wiley Branton. Some of you might know of him. Mr. Branton, if you ever see a picture very quickly of Thurgood Marshall coming out of the Supreme Court after one of the rulings, you'll see Wiley Branton, about 5'8", very light complexion guy, looks like a white guy. He was not. He was Black from Arkansas, trained lawyer. He was a dean of the law school. And he came to the law school specifically, ending his career for the purpose of redirecting people at the law school to get involved in more policy. We didn't do that. And so critical race theory in 1982 was not taught at Howard University Law School. It was developed, I think, in the 80s, though, by Professor Bell coming out of Harvard. And the phrase was coined later by a sister coming out of Harvard some years later. Having said that, we have to be very careful in allowing other people, which has occurred, to frame this conversation around critical race theory, and we participate in that foolish conversation. Because if you understand critical race theory, you know it's not going to be taught in school. It's a legal concept, it's a legal theory, and it's taught on the concept of race and how racism is embedded in all of these institutions. That's not going to be taught from K-12. It's not going to be taught probably in terms of on the undergraduate level. Maybe some schools might investigate it for the most part. So my point is, we have to be very critical as a group of people of allowing other people through this process of these think tanks to define for us how we have these conversations. For example, the sister mentioned ALEC, A-L-E-X, EC, I think it's called. That's a think tank. Well, in Alabama here, we have what we call the Alabama Policy Institute, one of the more wing institutes in the country. They send policy just like Alec. They send policy all across. The issue with us in connecting the dots is that we have never, and I'm talking fast to get out the way, we have never developed think tanks. We didn't take the time. Let me give you an example. At our 35th anniversary, and I think we're coming up on 40 years now or something, whatever it might be this year, I proposed to my graduating class of 1982 at Howard. I said, let's everybody's over 100 of us still living. Let's everybody, and they're close to retirement. Let's everybody, and some of them, most of them, I hope, are working enough where they've made some money. Well, let's take $5,000 to $10,000 rather than giving it to Howard University. Let's take that and set it aside and make a contribution to the law school with some specific directives there to develop a policy institute at Howard's Law School. You know what my classmates told me? No, absolutely not. All they wanted to do was contribute. And Gary, you are still talking that radical stuff that you talked when you were in law school. Your left perspectives are still coming out. Well, I've walked away and I give my contribution to the law, to the law school now, but I don't do it through my class anymore because I understand their mentality. That hurts me dearly, having said that. But they didn't want it, and we could have hired at Howard University, got some office and developed a policy institute for the first time, hired some young people coming out of law school, because if you say $5,000 to $10,000, think about 100 people giving that amount of money. We'd have had some seed money. We could have run some grant. And as we retire, we could have been those policy thinkers that Dr. Du Bois talked about in his book.
Yes.
We could have done that work as we retire. I'm retired now. So I do community work down here in Mobile. And trust me, for those of us who are in the South, it is very difficult to talk to people, especially in Alabama and especially in Mobile. So having said that, much love to everybody on this phone. Thanks for inviting me to the conversation. Would love to have a larger conversation, my dear friend Roy and Coach Carter, for the purpose of us focusing on one subject area. And let's talk about the issue of how do we create on this call real solidarity in a community. And maybe we become that think tank, so to speak, putting out some policy papers and other things for those who are not working maybe on this phone. Some people on this phone, I think they said they're still working. They're still young enough to work. I'm glad I'm not having to get up in the morning to speak to anybody. Thank you.
I'm a young guy. I'm a young guy. I'm still working. So, but Brother Gary, thank you so much for that. And I hope that we can follow up on that idea. I like that. It makes a lot of sense to me, and it's doable. At this time, we're coming to a close of this. Before I actually close it out, does anybody have any other point of view they would like to share before we actually close? My sister Catherine, go ahead.
I was just reminded with the conversation about Howard Law School. My mother was at Howard in the early 60s. She had interrupted her college to get married and have kids. So as I was growing up in Washington, I was on campus a lot with her. My mother was a political science major, and she was in a group called the Future Leaders in Politics. And one of the members of that group was Stokely Carmichael, who, of course, you know, his name, it became a different name later, but several of the folks, Kwame Ture, and several of the folks who were in that group became, ran for office later in life. I think one of the mayors or some kind of legislator in Maryland somewhere, and some other folks. But interestingly enough, because my mother had, you know, a family and a home, they used to meet at our house when I was a kid. And so it strikes me that what you're talking about probably was what their mindset was at that time. Again, this was 60. My mother got her degree in 64. So back in that time frame. And so I that's just a brilliant idea. And I wish and hope that there were folks coming along now who have that mindset, who would, you know, take us to the next step and what you're talking about, because that's
well, we certainly have we have the ingredients, we have the knowledge, we certainly have the education to make that happen. So it's something I want us all to think about, because we could make this happen. So thank you so much. Before we close, I'd like to as we're going to our final comments, behind the scenes, one of our members from behind the scenes that you have not seen that's really pulling a lot of strings in the background is Charles Morse. Charles, do you have a final comment as we close out?
Oh yeah, Vince, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah. First of all, I have to recognize my cousin Kathy. I have to send her some love. That's my cousin. Love you, Kathy. One of the things that I definitely, and the gentleman Gary who spoke, he said it, he was right on point. But I think one of the other things that I usually have a problem with, or I think is a challenge, is that we believe the lie, and it's been handed down, and we hand it down for the values of some other people who gave it to us. And we have a problem over the generations to seem to separate what somebody else gave us, that who we're not and have never been. Yeah. And I won't say this in reference to color. I'll just say it in reference when God created, he made us great. And I think for a lot of us, and you know when I say this, we have a problem believing that. And even when you try to tell people who we are, where we came from, and what we can become, they actually rather believe the lie. And so I think as we try to do this and as we try to uplift everyone, we have to continue because it's a hard fight and that it's going to be a continuous fight. But again, I got to just say, much love to you, Kathy.
Thank you, Charles. The elder statesman, brother Roy.
Yes, sir. I appreciate that connection to the elders. But I just want to thank those who acknowledge me in the work that will continue to do. But I think that the solidarity is totally important. But I first think I want to reference something Charles said. I think the lie is easier to believe than the truth, because it's almost like taking something down or digesting something. You know, back in the day when we were sick, you know, your mother used to give you some cod liver oil. Yep. And even though it was rough going down, it made you feel better in the morning. And I think that that's what we have digressed from, is the uncomfortable taste that the truth tastes like. And so it's easier for us to believe the lie. It's easier for us to be buffoons. It's easier for us to act a certain way, to be separate, but also want to be included. Yeah. Right? The fact of assimilation is, what are you assimilating into? You're assimilating into a system that was never created for you. And so when it comes up to defining what the system is, you look at it, well, I'm gonna create my own system. And your own system is only sort of what's the word I want to use? We have been destroying any contributions we've had. I told somebody the other day, I said, why is it that when you watch movies, the movies that they allow us to be in or now are usually attached to some drugs, some murdering, all of the things that are destructive to our communities? And why is the drug dealer the most revered person in the community on Thanksgiving and Christmas? Because he gives out turkeys that you pay for. And you think that he's giving you something. All you have done is kill the whole community by the deliverance and the deliverables of drugs in the community, and you only killed your own people. But then on Christmas and Thanksgiving, what do? You give them turkeys, and everybody in the neighborhood is excited, and they protect you at the highest level. And so I think that these conversations are very important. I think that not only are conversations important, but action is much more important. And I think that if you continue to be the messenger, there will be those who will listen to you and understand that we've gone through a great amount of travesty in our journey here, and we have overcome, and we're still here. And so there must be something. There must be something that a divine power is overseeing your journey. And if you don't believe that, then anybody else who has gone through half of what we've gone through are no longer here. And so I just want to thank everybody who came on. We're going to share this video. Please send me your email if I don't have it. My email is rorytedwards1@gmail, and I will forward this recording to you. Or if you're connected with somebody who invited you, we'll have it and they'll send it to you. But we want to get this message out, and we want to continue to have these conversations, but not just conversations. We want to have conversations of action. And so from that perspective, I want to say thank you to the people who have joined and those who mentioned my name tonight and respected my journey. And also, I want to say what's going on to my cousin Rosalind over there. She didn't say anything. She just joined, but I'm going to call her after this too. But thank you for joining too.
Coach Carter, very quickly.
Yes, sir. Yes,
I got to make this point very quickly for people not to forget, you not thought about it. When you think about the issue of policy, this society would have changed if they would have, and there's a call for this now by people, voices across the country, a third constitutional convention to rewrite that damn constitution. You can't amend ourselves into a constitution. The constitution was never written for us. It was never structured for us. It was never at our benefit, as we all know. And so they need a major with third one, whatever you want to call it, but it would be the third one, a constitutional convention to rewrite this constitution to make it inclusive of all people in this country. Then I don't feel like I'm amendized. Remember, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment only applies to a specific race of folks. That's African-American folks. That's us. It don't apply to the rest of the folks. And maybe you can find some semblance there of application to indigenous people. But other than that, it doesn't apply to the rest of the people who were immigrants to this country. And that's one of the major issues. Lastly, I will say, so Sister mentioned the voice of Kwame Ture. We should never forget, Kwame reminded us before his death. Eventually, the petitioner becomes a beggar. And we beg for too long. The petitioner becomes a beggar. That's what Kwame taught us. And we should always remember that. So thank you. I'm sorry, but I need to share that with you.
Not a problem. All I can say to my kings and queens, first of all, thank you so much for coming on and joining us in this special edition of Brother Can We Talk on a calendar topic of Black History Month. As we come in the last Sunday of the calendar event, I would remind us that we are 365, 24/7 in this struggle, in this fight, in this education. I thank you. I've learned a lot. I've never felt so empowered as to hear your opinions and to hear you voice them, to be able to share this opportunity with you. This was enlightening. This was encouraging. And watch out Monday morning, because I'm on fire right now. I got a lot I might want to do. So I might need y'all to get a GoFundMe to come get me in case I lose perspective. But I greatly appreciate all of your input. Thank you for being here. Thank you for enriching this opportunity. May God bless and keep you. May we not be strangers. May we have this opportunity once again to come and share our thoughts. On this, I say, brother, can we talk? Good evening.
Bye-bye.